The morning I was supposed to make partner, my boss slid a folded letter across his desk. "We know what you did," he said. "Your wife told us herself." 11 years I'd given that firm. Early mornings, 2 coffees on my desk because someone always came in cold. And the man who taught me everything wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I asked what I'd done. He just tapped the letter. For months, someone had been walking through my whole life, every colleague, every client, every quiet friendship, and turning the people who trusted me into people ashamed they ever had. By noon, I had no job, no name. What I didn't have yet was the one person she forgot. And that was the only mistake she made. I'm Elias, 33. 11 years at the same drafting table, and I still didn't understand the sentence he'd just said to me. So, let me tell you how a man loses everything he built in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Gideon Halbrook's office had a window that looked down on Rowan Street. You could see the building from there. Glass and pale stone, 4 stories. The community library on the ground floor with the reading room I'd fought 8 months to keep in the budget. My project, the one that put the firm on the map 2 years back. On a clear morning, the light came off it and filled Gideon's office like water. That morning, I didn't look at it. I looked at the letter. "Read it later," Gideon said. "You'll want privacy." He was 63. He'd hired me out of grad school when I had holes in my shoes and a portfolio held together with binder clips. He used to call me his steadiest hand. Now he stood at the window with his back half to me, the way you stand when you've decided something and you don't want to watch it land. "Gideon," I said, "whatever you heard, ask me. I'm right here." "I did ask," he said. "That's the problem, Elias. I asked around for weeks." Weeks. The word went in like a splinter. Weeks. And no one had asked me. Down the hall, I could hear the studio waking up. Chairs, a printer, somebody laughing at something. An ordinary Thursday for everyone but me. I set the letter down. I didn't open it yet. "At least tell me the charge," I said. Gideon turned, and for 1 second, just one, he looked less like a man who'd made up his mind and more like a man who was sick to his stomach. "You know," he said quietly, "that's what makes it worse. Here's the thing about being told you're guilty by someone you love. Your first instinct isn't anger. It's a frantic, humiliating helpfulness. You start volunteering your own life as evidence. I opened my mouth to list the 11 years like a receipt. The late nights, the client I'd talked off a ledge, the junior kid whose raise I went to bat for. I got 2 sentences in before I heard how it sounded, like a man reading his resume to a judge. So I stopped. Gideon slid a second page across, not the letter, a printout, an email chain, some of it highlighted in that acid yellow HR uses when they want a thing to look official. I read 3 lines and my ears started ringing. Somebody had written that I'd been telling clients Halbrook Reed was a sinking ship run by a man who should have retired a decade ago. That I'd been quietly interviewing at Vane & Cross, our biggest rival, and planned to walk out the door with the Rowan Street client in my back pocket. That I bullied the younger designers, took their work, and put my own name on it. Every line was a knife, and every knife was aimed at a different part of me. None of it was true, but that's not what stopped my breath. What stopped my breath was the last line of the email, the one the highlighter had lovingly saved for the end. Source verified. Spouse confirmed directly. Spouse. I read it 4 times before the word would hold still. Elias. Gideon's voice came from very far away. Camille came to Lorna weeks ago. She was in tears. She said she couldn't keep covering for you. I looked up at him, and somewhere under the ringing, a much older feeling was already climbing up out of the floor of me. A feeling I hadn't felt since I was 14 years old. The feeling of standing in a room where the truth was mine and the belief belonged to somebody else. They didn't drag me out. It was worse than that. It was polite. A woman from HR named Frances met me by my desk with a cardboard box already assembled, which told me the whole thing had been scheduled before I ever walked in. She was kind. That was the awful part. She kept saying, "Take your time," while a security contractor I'd never seen stood 4 feet away pretending to read his phone. I packed like a man in a dream, a framed sketch of Rowan Street, a dead succulent, the good mechanical pencil my dad left me, and on the corner of my desk, still in its shipping box, half unwrapped from that morning by someone who'd been excited for me, a brass nameplate. Elias Hughes, principal. They'd ordered it early. Someone had wanted me to see it the second I said yes. Frances saw me see it. She reached past me, quiet as anything, and set the box lid back down over it. "I'll hold on to this," she said. "For now." For now. 2 words doing the work of a coffin lid. They took my badge at the elevator, the magnetic key card I'd tapped against that reader 11,000 mornings. The contractor held out a little plastic tray for it, like at airport security, and I laid it down and watched the light on the reader go from green to nothing. The doors closed on the studio where I'd spent my entire adult life. Nobody waved, not because they hated me, because they'd all been told, very gently, over weeks, that I wasn't the man they thought. If your chest is tight right now, if you know exactly what it is to be handed a verdict before you're handed a question, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe so this story finds the people who need it. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I read everyone. Now let me take you back down to the street and to the phone call I made standing on the curb with a box in my arms. I called Camille. I want you to understand, even then, even holding a box on a sidewalk with the building I'd built glittering across the street at me, my first instinct was that she'd want to know. That she'd be as gutted as I was. That we'd figure it out together, the way we'd figured out 7 years of everything. That's not stupidity. That's marriage. You build a person into the load-bearing wall of your life, and you don't check the wall every morning to see if it's still there. She answered on the second ring. "Hi," she said. "Bright. Ordinary. How'd it go? Are you Principal Hughes now?" I stood very still, because there are 2 ways to ask that question. One is the way of a woman who doesn't know. The other is the way of a woman who knows exactly and wants to hear you say it out loud so she can measure the damage. I couldn't tell which one it was. That's the part I can't make you feel, no matter how well I tell it. The vertigo of hearing your wife's voice and not knowing, for the first time in 7 years, which wife you're talking to. "They fired me, Cam," I said. A pause, just slightly too long. "Oh my God," she said. "Elias, what? Why?" And I heard it. Under the shock, under the perfect pitch of the concern, I heard the thing you hear when a musician who has practiced a piece plays it live for the first time. I heard rehearsal. "I'll come home," I said. "We'll talk when I'm home." "Yes," she said. "Come home. We'll figure it out. We always figure it out. We always figure it out." She'd said that 1,000 times in 7 years. It had always sounded like a promise. Standing on Rowan Street, it sounded like a lock turning. I drove home the long way, and I made myself do the ugly math, because a man who won't count what he's lost can't fight for it. The house first. We'd stretched for it 3 years ago. A real stretch, the kind where you sign the papers with the dry mouth. The mortgage ran on my salary. The severance in that folder would cover a few months. After that, the house that Camille had picked the paint colors for became a countdown. Then the thing that mattered more than the house. I'm an architect. That word does a lot of quiet work. It means 11 years of school and exams and licensure, of building, slowly, drawing by drawing, project by project. A name that other architects will say yes to. In a business this size, your name is your license to work, not the paper on the wall. The word people say when your name comes up in a room you're not in. "Oh, Elias, solid. Trust him with anything." That word had just been changed, behind my back, in every room I'd never be in again. And here's what turned my stomach on that drive. A lie about your character isn't like a lie about a fact. A fact you can disprove. You produce the receipt, you win. But he's not who you think he is. How do you disprove a fog? You can't stand in front of the whole industry and prove you're not the kind of man who does the thing you never did. The more you insist, the more you sound like a man insisting. I gripped the wheel. 33 years old, a house on a clock, a marriage I already knew was a stage set, and the one thing I'd built instead of a family that believed me, my name, dissolving in water I couldn't even find the edge of. I did not cry. I wanted that on the record, not out of pride, but because it matters to what comes next. I didn't rage and I didn't cry. I got very, very quiet, the way I get. And somewhere in that quiet, a plan I didn't have yet started looking for its first brick. Because underneath the math, one certainty had already set like concrete. Only one person alive could have built a lie this well fitted to me. And before I tell you how I knew that for sure, I have to tell you how she found the crack in me in the first place. Let me tell you about the wall before I tell you how it fell. Camille and I met at a friend's engagement party the spring I turned 26. She was in marketing, corporate communications, she called it, which meant she got paid to make companies sound like they loved you. She was the most fluent person I'd ever met. She could walk into a room of strangers and within 20 minutes have every one of them believing she'd been on their side for years. I fell for that fluency like a stone falls for the bottom of a lake. I was the opposite of her. I let the work talk. I'd learned young that if you keep your head down and get it right, eventually the getting it right speaks for you. You don't have to defend yourself if the thing you built is standing there defending you. That was my whole philosophy of survival. Build the wall, let it hold. Camille used to tease me about it. "You'd let someone rob you blind," she said once, laughing, kissing my temple, "as long as they didn't insult your drawings." I laughed too. I thought it was affection. I know now it was reconnaissance. Because to run the campaign she ran, you first have to find the load-bearing wall, and then you have to find the crack in it that nobody else can see. She'd found mine years ago. She just hadn't needed it until now. I got home at 1 in the afternoon to a house that smelled like she'd been baking. That's a detail I'll never forget. Cinnamon. The good candles lit in the middle of the day. Camille in the kitchen in her soft gray sweater, turning toward the door with her arms already opening, her face already arranged into grief. "Baby," she said, and crossed the room and put her arms around me and the box between us. And I stood there with a dead plant and a nameplate I'd never own pressed to my chest, and let my wife hold me while she lied. "Who did this to you?" she whispered into my neck. "Tell me who. I'll kill them. I'll kill them." I closed my eyes, and I made a decision on that spot, in that kitchen, in the cinnamon dark behind my own eyelids, that I have thought about every day since. I decided not to ask her yet, not to say the word Gideon had said, not to watch her face when I said spouse, because I wasn't ready to lose the wall, even knowing, even certain. I wanted one more hour inside the house before I knocked it down. I held my wife and I said, "I don't know yet." And, over her shoulder, on the counter, her phone lit up with a message. I didn't read it. I couldn't have from there. But I watched her whole body register it, a small stiffening, the reflex of a person who has a second life running on that screen. And then, without letting go of me, without breaking the embrace, she reached back one hand and turned the phone face down. That was the moment I stopped being a man who'd been fired, and started being a man who was going to find out why. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her and listened to her breathe and did the thing I do best. I built. Not a wall this time, a map. I laid the accusations out in the dark like drawings on a table. 4 lies. I'd been trashing the firm to clients. I'd been secretly interviewing at Vane & Cross. I'd been planning to poach the Rowan Street client. I'd been stealing credit from junior staff and bullying them. And I asked the question I should have been asking about a lot of things for a lot longer. Not is it true? I knew it wasn't true. Who would even know enough to make it sound true? Because that was the terrible craftsmanship of it. A stranger couldn't have built those lies. They had the grain of real wood. To say I badmouthed Gideon, you'd have to know that Gideon and I argued about the Rowan Street budget, which we did, privately, respectfully, the way mentors and students argue. To say I was jumping to Vane & Cross, you'd have to know I'd had a coffee with their design director last fall, which I had once and turned down flat. To say I stole Wren's work, you'd have to know Wren existed at all. Every lie was a true thing, photographed from the exact angle that made it look like a crime. Only one person on Earth had that angle on all 4. The person who'd shared my dinner table for 7 years while I talked about my day. I turned my head on the pillow and looked at her sleeping face in the streetlight, calm and lovely and utterly still. And for the first time in my life, I understood the thing my father never could, that the most dangerous person in any story isn't the one who hates you. It's the one who's been taking notes. I need to take you back 13 years, but only for a minute, because you can't understand the size of what she did unless you understand the exact shape of the wound she aimed it at. When I was 14, my older brother wrecked our father's car. He'd taken it without asking, drunk, and put it into a guardrail on Route 9. He wasn't hurt. The car was totaled. And when my father stood in the driveway the next morning, white with rage, my brother pointed at me and said I'd been the one driving. I hadn't been in the car. I'd been asleep in my bed. I said so. Calmly, then not calmly, then in tears. It didn't matter. My brother was the charmer. My brother could look our father in the eye and make the sky any color he wanted. And I was the quiet one, the one who kept to his room and his sketchbooks. And quiet reads as guilty to a certain kind of man. My father believed him. I spent that whole summer grounded for something I didn't do, listening through the wall to my brother's friends coming and going. And I learned the lesson that built my entire adult life. Being right is not the same as being believed, and if you can't make people take your side, then stop needing them to. Build something so solid it doesn't require a witness. I never told anyone that story, except once. On our third date, in a diner at 2 in the morning, I told Camille. She held my hand across the table and her eyes were wet, and she said, "That will never happen to you again. Not while I'm here." I believed her. She was the only person alive who knew where the crack in the wall was. And 13 years later, she walked up to my father's grave of a wound, and she pressed her thumb into it, and she pushed. The next morning, I did something I've never done in my life. I lied to her first. "I'm going to go for a drive." I told Camille over coffee she'd made too sweet, the way she always did, the way I'd never once told her I didn't like. "Clear my head, maybe stop by the hardware store." "Good idea," she said, rubbing my back. "Take your time. And, Elias, don't call Gideon. Don't beg. You have your dignity. Let them come to you." Let them come to you. I nodded like a man taking his medicine, but I heard the instruction inside the advice. Don't call Gideon. Don't talk to the one man who might tell me what she'd said to his wife. I drove to a coffee shop 2 towns over, sat in the back with a cheap notebook feeling like a fool, and started making a list of everyone at the firm I still trusted enough to call. The first name on it was Nate. Nate Calloway and I had shared a wall for 9 years. Best man material if I'd been the kind of man who has a best man. I dialed him in the parking lot before I could talk myself out of it. He picked up, and I heard in the first half second that I shouldn't have. "Elias, not warm, careful, the voice you use with a man whose diagnosis you already know. Nate, I need to ask you something straight. Do you think I did any of what they're saying?" There was a pause I could have parked a truck in. "Look," he said, "it's not my business. But, man, if you were unhappy, you could have just said. You didn't have to trash Gideon behind his back. He's gutted." I never said a word against Gideon. That's the thing, though. And here it came, so quiet I almost missed it. "Camille said you'd say that. She warned us. She said, when it comes out, he'll deny all of it, and he'll be very calm and very convincing, because that's his whole thing. And here you are, calm and convincing." I sat in that parking lot with the phone against my ear, and I understood the full, breathtaking architecture of it. She hadn't just lied about me. She'd predicted my defense and handed my friends the antidote to it, months in advance. My calm, the one thing I'd built my whole life on, the thing that was supposed to make me trustworthy, she'd turned into the proof I was guilty. "Nate," I said, "that's the smartest trap I've ever heard. Doesn't mean I walked into it. It means she built it." "I hope you're right," Nate said, and he actually sounded like he did. "I really do, but you can see how it looks." I could. That was the horror of it. I could see exactly how it looked. I made 4 more calls that morning. I'm not going to walk you through all of them, because they were all the same call. Warm people, careful voices. I'm sure it'll work out. It's really not my place. Camille reached out to me weeks ago, actually. She was so worried about you. Every one of them had been visited. Everyone had been handed the same little vaccine against believing me. She'd gone person to person for 4 months, and in each of them, she'd planted a version of me that would come preloaded to explain away anything I said. One of them, an old friend named Pete, finally just sighed and said the quiet part out loud. "Man, I want to be on your side, but your own wife's the one crying about it. What am I supposed to do? Call her a liar?" And I had no answer for him, because that was the whole trick in one sentence. You can doubt a rival. You can doubt a bitter coworker. Nobody in the world thinks to doubt the woman weeping over the man she loves. She'd wrapped her knife in the one thing no one ever inspects. Every call was just teaching me the same lesson in a new voice. I almost set the phone down for good. Then I made the one call that told me how deep the water actually was. I called a woman named Dana. Dana's a recruiter. She'd been trying to poach me for years, half joking, the way recruiters do with people they can't have. If anyone would tell me the market for a fired principal in waiting, it was Dana. She was kind. That's how I knew. Elias, honey, I'm always glad to hear from you, she said. And then gently, can I be straight with you? Because I like you. Please! It's already out. In the industry. 2 firms I'd have called for you this morning already heard a version. Left Halbrook under a cloud. Something about bad-mouthing leadership and poaching a client. In a town this size, that's not a rumor. That's a resume now. I looked out the coffee shop window at nothing. So it's not just the job, I said. It's the name, sweetheart, Dana said, not unkindly. In this business, the name is the whole thing. I can't sell a name that's got a whisper on it. Nobody can, I'm sorry. Get it cleared up and call me the day you do. Get it cleared up. As if a whisper is a stain you can just scrub. As if there's a counter you can walk up to and say, I'd like my name back. Please. I hung up and sat there and felt the water close over my head. Because this was the wound, wasn't it? The exact one. It had never been about one man's office. It was about the thing I'd spent 33 years building instead of a family that believed me. My name, my work, the only witness I'd ever trusted. And someone had walked up to it in the dark and set it on fire. And the whole industry was standing around watching it burn and nodding. Well, where there's smoke, I almost didn't get up from that table. There was one more thing I put together that morning, sitting in the wreckage of my own reputation, and it was the ugliest piece. Wren. I kept hearing her name in the echoes. From Nate, that girl in the studio, people are saying. From one of the careful callers, is it true about the young designer? And in the firm's official charge sheet, cold and typed, takes credit from junior staff, creates a hostile environment. And I finally understood the cruelest efficiency of the whole thing. Camille had used Wren twice. To the spouses, at the dinners, over wine. Wren was the girl I was leaving her for. Poor Camille, her husband, and that pretty young designer. Everyone knows how these things go. That's the story that made the wives hold Camille's hand and hate me. To the firm, Wren was the girl I'd bullied and stolen from. That's the story that made me fireable. One young woman, who'd done nothing but be talented near me, turned into 2 different weapons pointed at my chest. And the sickest part, the part that made me put my head down on that sticky coffee shop table for a second, was that I couldn't even call Wren to warn her. Couldn't reach out. Couldn't check on her. Couldn't do the decent thing. Because the second I did, I'd be exactly the man they'd said I was. A fired man calling the young designer. See? See how he is? Camille had thought of everything. She'd even sealed the exits marked kindness. I closed the notebook. It was a short list. That was the genius of what she'd done. I'll give her that, the way you give a hurricane its name. She hadn't attacked me. She'd attacked the space between me and everyone else. She'd spent months at office happy hours and spouse dinners and charity 5Ks, being warm, being wonderful, being concerned. Leaning in close to this wife and that husband and saying, can I tell you something? I'm worried about Elias. Please don't say I said anything. You can't fight a whisper. You reach for it, and it's already behind you. I got through my coffee, and I had exactly one name I was sure of. And it wasn't a name Camille would ever have thought to worry about. Which, it turns out, was the whole ballgame. Her name was Marnie. Marnie ran operations at Halbrook Reed. Had for 20 years. She was 55, built like she could carry a filing cabinet up 3 flights. And she knew where every dollar, every contract, and everybody was buried in that firm. She wasn't a designer. She didn't come to the design reviews. At the parties, she stood by the food with a plate and a dry comment and watched everyone else perform. Camille had met her a dozen times, and a dozen times I'd watched my wife's radar sweep the room, sort everyone into useful or not, and file Marnie under not. An older woman in sensible shoes who answered the phones, beneath her notice. Camille worked the partners' wives. She worked the ambitious young designers. She worked the people with something to gain or lose. She never once worked Marnie. I think about that a lot, about how the entire architecture of her plan had one flaw, and the flaw was contempt. She was so good at reading who mattered that she never bothered to charm the one person who saw the whole board. I didn't know any of that yet, sitting in that coffee shop. I just knew Marnie had always been straight with me, and had never once, in 11 years, wanted anything from me. I texted her, Marnie, it's Elias. I know you probably heard I'm not asking you to take a side. I just need to know what they think I did. If you can't, I understand. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, not here, Not on my work phone. Give me an hour. I sat in that coffee shop for an hour and 11 minutes, and I want to tell you, I was calm. I was not calm. I was a man watching to see if the last rope was going to hold. Before we go on, I want you to do something for me. Before I tell you what Marnie said, tell me down in the comments. At this point in the story, do you think she called? Or do you think the last rope broke too? Say it out loud before you hear it. Most people guess wrong. Marnie called. First thing, she said, no hello. I don't believe a word of it. I've watched you buy coffee for interns you'll never see again. Bullies don't do that. Now, what have they told you? I told her all 4 lies, the email chain, the acid highlighter, source verified, spouse confirmed directly. There was a long silence on the line. Elias, she said finally, how much of what I'm about to say do you already know? Assume none of it. Okay. I heard her close a door. About 4 months ago, your wife started coming around. 4 months. Not to see you, Marnie said. You were never in the office when she came. She'd come at lunch or right at 5 when you were on site. She'd bring pastries. She'd sit with Lorna Holbrook. They'd gotten close. Coffee. That book club. And she'd cry a little. Quiet. Never a scene. She told Lorna she was scared for you, that you'd changed, that you were angry all the time, talking about leaving, saying things about Gideon. And Lorna believed her. Elias, Lorna loved her. Everyone did. That was the whole trick. Marnie's voice dropped. You don't defend against a woman crying about how worried she is. You comfort her. You bring her a tissue. And then 3 weeks later, when you hear Elias got a coffee with somebody from Vane and Cross, you don't think coincidence. You think, oh no, Camille was right. I closed my eyes in that parking lot. She wasn't spreading rumors, I said slowly. She was planning predictions, so that when normal things happened, they'd look like proof. There it is, Marnie said. That's exactly it. She never told a single lie you could catch her in. She told them worries, and worries can't be sued. Then she said the thing that changed everything. But she made one mistake, Marnie said. She put something in writing, and I have it. I have replayed that sentence more times than I can count. She put something in writing, and I have it. Marnie, I said, what is it? Not on the phone, she said. And Elias, not yet. Listen to me. Right now, you're a man who got fired on a whisper. If you go storming in with a phone call from the office manager, you're a bitter ex-employee harassing people. You'll lose. I've watched this firm chew up angrier and more right men than you. So what do? You do what you always do, she said. You build it so solid it doesn't need you to shout. Give me a few days. Let me talk to a couple of people. There are more of us than you think who never bought it, but we need it clean, and we need it all at once, in a room where they can't look away. Why are you doing this? I asked. It came out rawer than I meant. You could just keep your head down. Nobody'd blame you. Marnie was quiet for a second. 20 years ago, she said, somebody at a job told a story about me, and not one person in that building stood up. I swore if I ever watched it happen to a decent person again, I'd be the one who stood up. A pause. Turns out it's you. Bad luck for her. Go home. Act normal. Don't tip her off. Can you do that? Act normal. Go home to the woman who dismantled me and pass the salt. Yeah, I said. I can do that. I'd been doing it my whole life, sitting in a house where the truth was mine and the belief was somebody else's, and keeping my face still. I just never thought I'd have to do it for the person I married. Here is what living in that house for the next 9 days was like. Camille was, I have to tell you, magnificent. If I hadn't known, she'd have carried me. She made my favorite dinners. She rubbed my shoulders while I sat pretending to job hunt. She floated ideas. Maybe this was a blessing. Maybe we move somewhere new, start fresh. She'd always wanted to try the coast. She was building me a whole new life, warm and far away, in a town where nobody knew my name and nobody could ever give it back to me. Every kindness was a brick in a wall between me and the truth. And I understood, finally, the shape of the endgame. She hadn't gotten me fired to hurt me. That was almost incidental. She'd gotten me fired to isolate me. A man with a career has colleagues, references, a version of himself that other people carry around and can hand back to him. A man without one has only the person who tells him who he is. She wanted to be the only mirror I had left. One night she came to bed and laid her head on my chest and said, sleepy and content, "You know what's funny? I feel closer to you now than I have in years, like it's just us again, against the world. Against the world. I stroked her hair and looked at the ceiling and thought about Marnie's voice. There are more of us than you think. Yeah, I said. Just us. And I felt the last of the wall come down inside me. Quiet. No sound at all. And something colder and steadier take its place. On the 5th day, she took me to a dinner party, and I watched her perform me in front of an audience. It was at the Renners, old friends, a couple we'd known for years. I didn't want to go. Camille insisted softly, the way she insisted on everything now. It'll be good for you. People need to see you're all right, that we're all right. I understand now what the dinner was actually for. It was a fitting. She was trying the story on in public, checking the seams, making sure it hung right on other people before the big day came. She was flawless. She waited until the second glass of wine, until the table had gently, inevitably, circled around to, "How are you two holding up?" And then she set down her fork and pressed her lips together and let her eyes shine and said, "You know what? I'm just so proud of him. Whatever happened at that firm, and I don't even fully understand it. Elias has handled it with more grace than I could." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "He won't say a bad word about any of them, even now, even after everything they did to him." The table melted. Someone said, "Oh, Camille." Someone else looked at me with soft, terrible pity. And I saw the trap inside the compliment, laid so smooth you'd cut your hand feeling for the edge. Whatever happened, I don't even fully understand it. In one sentence, she'd made herself the loyal wife, standing bravely by her mysterious, troubled husband. If I stayed quiet, I confirmed there was a dark secret worth her grace. If I spoke up, if I said, "Actually, Camille understands it perfectly," she built it. I became the ungrateful man attacking the saint who'd stood by him. There was no move on that board that didn't lose. So I did the only thing left. I lifted her hand and I kissed the back of it in front of everyone. And I said, "I don't deserve her." Camille's smile didn't slip, but her eyes came to mine for just a second, and behind the shine there was a flicker of something that wasn't grief at all. It was the look of a player who's just noticed her opponent is still on the board. Good, I thought, kissing her hand. Notice. That night, back home, I ran one small test. I needed to know if I was right about Ren. We were doing the dishes. Camille washed, I dried. 7 years of the same small choreography. I kept my voice easy, tired, a man just thinking out loud. "I feel bad about Ren," I said. "The young designer, this can't be easy on her either. Her name getting dragged into whatever this is. Maybe I should reach out. Just make sure she's okay. She's a good kid." Camille's hands didn't stop moving in the water, but they slowed, just a hair, the way a heartbeat catches and covers. "Oh, honey, no," she said, light as anything. "That's exactly the kind of thing that'll get twisted right now." A fired man calling the young woman from the office. You know how people talk. It'd hurt her more than help her. The kindest thing you can do for that girl is stay far away from her. A beat. Trust me on this one. And there it was. Confirmation. Gift wrapped in concern. Because think about it. Ren was nothing to Camille, a junior designer my wife had met maybe twice. There was no earthly reason for Camille to have a firm, ready, protective opinion about whether I contacted her, unless Ren wasn't nothing, unless Ren was load-bearing, unless the entire double lie, the mistress downstairs, the bullied girl upstairs, needed Ren kept in the dark and kept away from me, so the two versions of her never met and compared notes. "You're right," I said, drying a plate. "I'll leave her be. You always know how these things look." "That's what I'm here for," Camille said and kissed my shoulder. I set the plate in the rack very carefully so my hands wouldn't shake. I'd tested the wall, and the wall had answered. Ren was the keystone, and a woman who guards a keystone that hard has no idea she's just told you where the whole thing comes down. Before dawn the next morning, I heard her voice through the office door. I'd gotten up for water, her light was on, and she was on the phone. Low, but not the low of someone hiding. The low of someone who thinks the house is asleep. It wasn't the voice I knew. My wife's voice with me was warm, rounded, soft at the edges. This voice was flat and quick and businesslike. A closer's voice. The voice from before I ever met her. From the marketing floors where she'd learned that a story is just a thing you build and then make people stand inside. I caught one sentence before I made myself walk away. No, it's basically done. I just have to get through Thursday looking like the grieving wife, and then it's clean. Thursday. I stood in my own hallway in the dark, holding a glass of water, and I understood that somewhere on the other side of that door, there was a calendar with my whole life circled on it, and she'd been living inside 2 houses this entire time. The warm one she showed me, and the flat, quick one where the work got done. I went back to bed. I did not drink the water. On the 6th day, I got a look at the mistake. It came from the least likely place. Lorna Hallbrook, Gideon's wife, the one Camille had wept to, called the house on a Tuesday afternoon. Camille was out. I almost didn't answer. "Elias," Lorna said. Her voice was strange, careful. "I know I probably shouldn't call, but I've been sick about all of this, and I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Always," I said. "That message you sent, about Gideon." A breath. "Camille showed it to me months ago. She was shaking, Elias. She said she found it on your phone, and it broke her heart, and I've carried it ever since. Did you really call him a dinosaur who should have been put out to pasture 10 years ago? Did you really say the firm was his ego with a lobby?" The room tilted. "Lorna," I said, "I never wrote that. Not those words, not to anyone." She showed me a screenshot. "Then read it to me," I said. "Every word, please." And she did. And as she read, I recognized it. The way you recognize your own child in a stranger's cruel drawing. It was mine, some of it. The bones of a real text I'd sent Camille herself a year ago, venting after a hard budget meeting. Sometimes I think Gideon holds on too tight. He built this place and he can't let it grow past his own ego. But God, Lorna, I love him. He's the closest thing to a father I've got. That last line, "I love him, he's the closest thing to a father I've got," was gone, cropped out, cut at the exact word that turned a son's frustration into a traitor's contempt. "Lorna," I said, and my voice was very quiet, "can you do one thing for me? Don't delete that screenshot. Whatever you do, keep it. Keep the message she sent it to you in, exactly as it is." "Why?" "Because it isn't the whole text," I said, "and I can prove it, but not to you. In a room, with everyone." That night, I texted Marnie 2 words. "Lorna has it," and Marnie texted back 4. Then we have her. The next evening, I met Marnie in person for the first time outside the office, in a diner off the highway where nobody from Halbrook Reed would ever eat. She was already in the back booth when I got there, coat still on, 2 coffees on the table. She slid one to me without asking. I thought of my own desk, the 2 coffees, and I had to look at the napkin dispenser for a second. "Okay," she said, "here's where we are. And here's what it's going to cost." She laid it out like she laid out everything. Flat. Exact. No theater. In 4 months, she said, Camille had gotten to a lot of people, but not everyone. And Marnie had spent 9 days quietly finding the ones who never bought it. "There's more of us than you'd think," she said. "You were good to people who couldn't do anything for you. That leaves a mark, even when nobody says so. The problem isn't finding people who believe you. It's that believing you privately costs them nothing. And standing up publicly could cost them their jobs. Gideon signs their paychecks. Camille cried on Lorna's shoulder. You do the math on who's safer to side with. So how do we make it safe? We don't." She looked at me steady. "We make it undeniable. That's different. A brave person can be argued with, a stack of facts in one room, all at once, in front of witnesses. That can't be walked back. That's why it has to be a real meeting, official, on the record, with the partners in the chairs. Not a phone call, not an email they can forward around and spin. A room." I turned my coffee in my hands. "There's someone I need to ask you about," I said. "Ren." Marnie's face didn't change, but something behind it did. "I won't use her," I said. "I mean it. Camille already turned that girl into a weapon twice without her permission. I'm not going to be the 3rd person who does it. If she's in that room, it's her choice, made with all the information, and she can walk out any time, and I'll never say a word." For the first time since I'd met her, Marnie looked at me like I'd surprised her. "She came to me," Marnie said quietly. 3 days ago, she'd heard what they were saying, that you bullied her, stole from her. She was shaking. She said, "That's backwards. He's the only one who ever protected me here, and they're using my name to bury him." Marnie's jaw tightened. "She asked to be in the room, Elias. I told her exactly what it might cost her. She said she didn't care. So don't you go being noble and taking that away from her too. She gets to choose. She chose. I didn't say anything for a while. Okay, I finally managed. Who else? Harlan Reyes. I looked up. I called your client, Marnie said, almost daring me to object. Told him what they'd accused you of, that you were plotting to steal his account, running the firm down to him. You know what he did? He laughed. Then he stopped laughing and got very quiet and said, "Get me in that room. On a phone, on a screen, in person. I don't care. I've got an email that'll end this in one read." He's dialing in. "And the message," I said. "The text. Lorna has the cropped version. I need the whole one proved, so it can't just be my word against a screenshot." "How do you get that clean?" "I already asked for it," I said. "My phone carrier keeps the records. I requested my own, the full thread, time-stamped, straight from the source. Nothing I could have faked, nothing anyone can say I doctored. It came back yesterday. The whole message is there. Both halves." Marnie sat back. For a long moment, she just looked at me across 2 cooling coffees. "You know what she got wrong about you?" she said. "She told everyone you'd defend yourself with words so they'd distrust your words." She tapped the table. "She never once thought you'd defend yourself with everyone else's." I drove home from that diner the long way because I had a decision to make, and it wasn't the one you'd think. The plan would work. I could feel it. The way you feel a structure go from sketch to sound when the loads finally find the ground. But a working plan and a right one aren't the same thing, and I needed to be honest with myself in the car, alone, where there was no one to perform for. Because to save my name, I was going to have to end my wife's in a room, in front of people, on the record. She'd walk in as the brave, grieving spouse, and she'd walk out as a woman who forged a message to get her husband fired. It would follow her. It might follow her forever. And some part of me, some 7-year part, recoiled from that. Not because she didn't deserve it, because I didn't want to become the thing she'd accused me of being. A man who destroys people. If I walked into that room, hungry to watch her burn, then somewhere in the wreckage she'd win anyway, wouldn't she? She'd have finally made me into him. So I made a rule for myself, right there at a red light, and I've kept it. I wasn't going to attack her. I was going to ask questions and let true people answer them. I wasn't going to raise a single lie against her, not one. Every word out of my mouth in that room would be a fact I could stand behind. If the truth destroyed her, that was the truth's business. My only job was to stop being the one man in the world willing to swallow it. That's the line, I think. That's the whole line between justice and revenge, and it's thinner than anybody wants it to be. Revenge is when you pick up her weapons. Justice is when you refuse to and win anyway, and let her watch you stay clean. The light turned green. I drove home to my wife, and I decided I'd give her one thing she'd never once given me. In that room, before it all came down, I'd tell her I believed her fear was real, because it was. I'd give her the truth even about herself. It was the only weapon I had that she'd never see coming. I want to be honest with you about the days that came next, because if I make myself sound calm the whole way through, I'm lying, and I've had enough of lying to last me a life. There was a night, the 8th night, when I nearly threw it all away. I was standing in our kitchen at 2 a.m. Camille was asleep. Her phone was charging on the counter, face up, and it lit with a message, and I saw the name and I saw the words before it went dark. The name was a woman from her old marketing world. The words were, "So proud of you for finally getting out. Once the divorce is filed, you'll be free of him for good. Did the severance clear? Divorce, filed, severance. She wasn't building me a new life on the coast. She was building herself an exit, and she wanted me broke and disgraced when she took it, so that when I told people what she'd done, and she knew I eventually would, I'd be the bitter, unemployed ex-husband with a story too ugly to be true. She'd fired me to preload my own defense as evidence against me. I stood there with her phone in my hand, and I felt the 14-year-old in me stand up in the dark, and he wanted to wake her. He wanted to scream. He wanted, for once in his life, to be loud, to make somebody's father believe him by sheer volume. And I put the phone back down, face up, exactly as I'd found it. Because Marnie was right. The 14-year-old had never won a single argument by being loud. The thing that was going to save me wasn't volume. It was patience and other people, and the truth laid out so clean and so complete that even a room full of people who wanted to look away wouldn't be able to. I went back to bed. I lay down next to the woman filing my divorce. And I waited. 2 days before the review, they almost took it from me. And the terrible part is, they did it kindly. Frances from HR called my cell on a gray afternoon while Camille was out. Her voice was soft, apologetic, the voice of a decent person doing an indecent errand. Elias, this is off the record, and I could get in trouble for it, so please hear me as a friend. A breath. The partners met this morning. There's a feeling, a strong feeling, that this whole thing could be handled more quietly, cleanly, for everyone. Cleanly, I said. A number's been discussed, a real one. Full severance, 12 months, plus a neutral reference the firm will honor to anyone who calls. We'll say it was a mutual, amicable parting. No cloud, nothing. Dana can sell that. You could be working again in a month. She paused. In exchange, you'd sign a release, and the review on Thursday would just be a signing. Not the other thing. The other thing being the truth. The other thing being accusations against a spouse in a room full of witnesses, Frances said gently. Elias, think about who's in that room. Gideon fired his best man over something Lorna handed him in tears. If it comes out that Lorna's closest friend forged it, do you understand what that does? To Gideon? To Lorna, who did nothing but believe someone she loved? To the firm's name, which is your name too? Everybody bleeds. Everybody. The kind thing, the gracious thing, is to take the good money and let it stay buried. You'd be doing everyone a mercy. And there it was. Not a threat. A mercy. The oldest one in the world, the one my whole family had run on. Be the good one. Be the quiet one. Swallow it so nobody else has to. Being wrong in silence is a kindness. Being right out loud is cruelty. Take the check. Keep the peace. Protect everyone by agreeing, one more time, to be the man who is quietly wrong. Can I think about it? I said. Of course, Frances said, relieved. Take tonight. I hung up. And then, before I'd even set the phone down, it buzzed again. Marnie. Don't panic, Marnie said, which is how I knew to panic. But I lost one. Nate. He got a call from a partner this morning. Real friendly, real casual, just checking in. And by lunch, he decided the safest thing for his family was to not be in that room. I can't blame him. He's got 2 kids and a mortgage, she exhaled. And Harlan's flight got moved. He says he'll dial in, but the connection from where he'll be is shaky. Elias, I'm going to be honest with you because you've had enough people be dishonest. It got thinner today. It'll still work, but it got thinner. I said something, I don't remember what. I hung up. Then I got in my car in the grocery store parking lot, and I did not drive anywhere. I sat with both hands on the wheel, and I let the 14-year-old have the car for a while. Because this was his exact nightmare, wasn't it? This was the driveway on Route 9, 13 years later, in a nicer coat. The truth was mine. And every single force in the world, the money, the kindness, the mercy, the mortgages of good men, was lined up gently telling me the same thing my father told me. Let it go. It's easier for everyone if you're the one who is wrong. I could take the check. I could be working in a month. Camille would get her clean divorce. Lorna would keep her friend. Gideon would keep his pride. And the story in the industry would just fade, the way whispers do, into a permanent light gray haze around my name that never quite lifted, but never quite killed me either. I could have my life back. I just couldn't have my name in it. And I sat there in that parking lot, 33 years old, and I felt my throat close, and I said out loud to nobody, to the 14-year-old, to my father, to the empty passenger seat. I didn't do it. Just that. 4 words cracked right down the middle. The whole restraint I'd carried since that morning, since that driveway, since forever. It broke on 4 words in a Kroger parking lot with nobody there to hear them. I didn't do it. I have never once in my life done the thing they said I did. And then I sat with that. And something in me that had been lying down for 13 years stood up. Because here's what the 14-year-old never got. And the man finally did. Last time I'd been alone. Last time there was no Marnie who'd been watching by the food, no Wren who came forward on her own, no Harlan who laughed and said, "Get me in the room," No untampered thread sitting in an envelope with my name on it. Last time, taking the quiet way out wasn't a choice. There was no other door. This time, there was a door. It was just a hard one. I picked up the phone. I called Marnie back. "Dinner's fine, but it's fine," I said. My voice was steady again, level as a laid floor. "We don't need everyone. We need enough, and we need it true, and we have that. Tell Francis I'm not signing anything. We go." There was a silence. "We go," Marnie said, and I swear I could hear her smiling. Marnie called it a review. That's the polite word Halbrook Reed used for the meeting. It's scheduled at the end of that second week, in the big conference room on the 4th floor, the one with the long table and the Rowan Street model under glass in the corner. Officially, it was to close out my file, sign the severance, collect the last of my things, make it final. Gideon would be there. Francis from HR, Warren Ainsley, the other named partner. Lorna, because Gideon had, God help him, started bringing his wife to things since she'd become so close to poor Camille. And Camille, that was the part that turned my stomach. She'd asked to come. She'd told Gideon she wanted to support Elias through the closure and apologize to the firm for the position I was put in. She was going to sit in that room as the brave, heartbroken wife who'd done the hard, honest thing. She had no idea Marnie had spent 9 days quietly making calls. She had no idea Wren was going to be there. She had no idea Harlan Reyes, the Rowan Street client, the developer whose account I'd supposedly been plotting to steal, had, at Marnie's request, dug up an email and agreed to dial in. She thought she was walking into a funeral. The morning of the review, I put on the same suit I'd worn on the day they fired me. Camille adjusted my tie in the mirror, tender as ever. "Be gracious," she murmured. "Don't give them anything to remember you badly by. Let's just close this chapter with our heads high." "You're right," I said. I looked at her in the mirror, really looked, one last time, at the woman I'd built into the wall of my life. "Let's close it." She smiled at my reflection. I have never in my life meant a sentence more. I'd kept my head down for 9 days. 9 days of passing the salt and kissing her hand and holding my face still, while a handful of people I'd almost forgotten to count on quietly built a room where the truth couldn't be looked away from. There was nothing left to do now but walk into it, in the same suit they'd fired me in, beside the woman who'd worn me down to nothing. 4th floor, the long table, every card on it, at last turning face up. There were 12 people in that conference room. I counted them the way I count anything I'm afraid of, one at a time to make it real. Gideon at the head, Warren Ainsley to his right, Francis from HR with her acid yellow folder, Lorna near the door. 3 of the senior designers I'd worked beside for a decade, invited as witnesses to my conduct. A young associate taking minutes. Marnie against the wall with a plain manila envelope on her lap and no expression at all. A speakerphone in the center of the table, its little green light on. Harlan Reyes already dialed in from his car. Wren in the corner, pale, 27 years old, looking like she might be sick. And Camille, beside me, her hand finding mine on the table, squeezing, playing the loyal wife for the room. Gideon opened his folder. "Thank you all for coming. This is a difficult day. Elias, we're here to close things out with as much decency as we can. I want that on the record." "I appreciate that," I said. "Before we sign anything, may I say one thing?" Gideon glanced at Francis. Francis gave a small nod. "Of course," Gideon said. "You've earned that much." Camille's hand tightened on mine. A warning. Stay gracious, stay small. I turned my hand over and held hers back, gently, so the room could see it. "2 weeks ago," I said, "you told me you knew what I did, and that my wife told you herself. I've spent 2 weeks trying to understand that sentence, and I think I finally do, so I'm not going to defend myself today." The room relaxed a half-inch, a man surrendering, easy to watch. "I'm just going to ask the people in this room some questions," I said, "and I'd like you to hear their answers." I looked at the speakerphone. "Harlan," I said, "you still there?" "I'm here, Elias," said Harlan Reyes's voice, filling the room. Camille's hand went very still in mine. "Harlan," I said, "the firm was told I planned to leave and take your account with me, that I'd been telling you Halbrook Reed was a sinking ship. I'd like you to tell everyone, in your own words. Did I ever, once, say anything like that to you?" There was a pause on the line. When Harlan spoke, his voice had an edge I recognized from every hard negotiation we'd ever won together. "Can I ask who told you that?" Harlan said. "Because I've done 4 projects with this firm, and every single one, Elias sat across from me and talked me out of things that would have made him money and made you look worse. On Rowan Street, he fought his own boss to keep a reading room that blew the budget because he said the neighborhood needed somewhere warm to sit. A guy planning to jump ship doesn't fight for your building's soul, folks. He pads the invoice and coasts." Warren Ainsley shifted in his seat. "And for the record," Harlan went on, "last fall I offered to follow him if he ever went out on his own. You know what he said? He said Halbrook took a chance on me when I was nobody. I don't leave debts unpaid. I've got that email. I forwarded it to your operations manager this morning. Read it into your minutes." Marnie slid a printed page down the long table. It came to rest in front of Gideon. Gideon read it. I watched his face change, the specific way a proud man's face changes when he realizes he's been made a fool of, and worse, that he did it to himself. "Thank you, Harlan," I said. "One down." I didn't look at Camille, but I felt her, beside me, recalculating. She'd built the lies out of true wood. She'd never planned for the wood to speak. "Wave 1, Marnie said quietly, to no one, and almost smiled. "Wren," I said. She flinched when I said her name. 27, brilliant, 3 years out of school, and she'd been told to sit in this room because she was Exhibit B, the young designer I'd supposedly bullied and stolen from. "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "I mean that. Whatever they told you your job was here today. You don't owe me your career. If you want to stay quiet, stay quiet. I'll understand." She looked at me. Then she looked at the 3 senior designers who'd come to witness against me, and at Gideon, and at Francis's folder. And then Wren stood up. She didn't have to stand. She stood anyway. "He gave me the credit," she said. The room went quiet. "The Meridian Pavilion," she said, her voice shaking and then not shaking. "The concept that won us the commission, that was mine. I was a second-year nobody, and I was terrified, and I almost didn't show him the sketch. And when we presented to the client, Elias put my name on it. Mine. In front of everyone. The client asked who did the roofline, and he said, "She did," and he pointed at me. "Principals don't do that. Bullies don't do that." She was crying now and furious about it. "I got my raise because he walked into Gideon's office and threatened to put his own name behind mine. And you brought me here to say he stole from me?" She turned to Gideon. "He gave me the credit," she said again. "Write that down." The young associate wrote it down. 2 of the 3 senior designers were staring at the table now, and I understood something I'll carry the rest of my life. Most people who go along with a lie aren't liars. They're just people who were never asked. Camille's whole machine ran on nobody ever being asked out loud, in a room with the truth sitting right there. I was asking now. Then something happened that I hadn't planned and couldn't have. The room started to turn on its own. Sella Marsh, one of the 3 senior designers the firm had brought in to witness against me, put up a hand, half raised, like a kid unsure of the rules. "I was told to come here and say Elias was difficult to work under," she said, "that he made people miserable. And I kept waiting for someone to ask me if that was true, and nobody did, so..." She swallowed. 2 years ago, I made a mistake on the Fairview drawings. A real one. Cost us. And when the client came in hot, Elias took it. In the meeting, to their face. He said it was his call, his oversight. It wasn't. It was mine. He never once told anyone. I only know because I was in the room. She looked at Gideon. "That's the man you fired for creating a hostile environment. He ate a mistake that could have ended my career and let me think nobody noticed." Beside her, the second designer, Reed, was already nodding, jaw set, like a man who'd been holding something too long. "And the Vane and Cross thing," Reed said, "that he was secretly interviewing there, plotting to jump ship. I was at that coffee. He didn't secretly go. He brought me. Because Vane and Cross had a young estimator he wanted to hire away from them. For us. For Halbrook. He was recruiting for this firm on his own time, and somebody turned it into him betraying it." Reed spread his hands. "I've had that in my chest for 2 weeks. I should have said it the first day. 2 down out of 3, and I hadn't asked either of them. That's the thing about a lie built on true wood. Every person who is actually there is a live wire, and all it takes is one to say, "Wait, I was there," out loud, in a room, and the rest remember they were too. Warren Ainsley hadn't said a word the whole meeting. He was the careful one, the partner who measured a room before he spent a syllable in it. Now he set down his pen, and he looked at Gideon, and he said, low and even, "Gideon, I think we called the wrong meeting, and I think we owe this man an entirely different one." He glanced at the young associate taking minutes. "Get all of this down, every word. We're going to need it." I watched Gideon's face come apart another degree. He'd built his firm on the judgment of these exact people, and one by one they were telling him his judgment had been handed to him pre-poisoned. The pity in the room, the pity I'd been drowning in for 2 weeks, the soft, awful poor Camille troubled Elias. I felt it lift off me like a fog burning back. It didn't move to me. It moved slowly, terribly, toward the woman sitting at my side, and she felt it move. That's the moment a cornered person either goes quiet or gets loud. That's when Camille let go of my hand. She did it slowly, tenderly. The way you release something you're setting free rather than something you're dropping. And she straightened in her chair and dabbed one eye and turned to the room with the saddest, bravest little smile I have ever seen on a human face. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said softly. "Elias, sweetheart, I love you. But this, turning a closure meeting into a trial, dragging poor Wren into it, this is the anger I've been trying to protect everyone from. This is why I finally had to say something. Do you all see now? Do you see what it's like to live with it?" It was a beautiful move. I'll die respecting it. In 4 sentences, she'd tried to turn every fact I'd just laid down into more evidence of my instability. The angrier I got, the more right she looked. She was betting that I'd finally crack, raise my voice, point a finger, become the man she'd described. She'd bet her whole life on the 14-year-old in me getting loud. Gideon looked at me. So did Warren. So did the room, waiting to see which man I was. I didn't get loud. I looked at my wife, and I kept my voice as level as a laid floor, and I said, "You're right, Camille. Someone in this room has been saying cruel things about Gideon behind his back. Let's read the actual message, all of it. Lorna has it on her phone right now. The screenshot you sent her 4 months ago." I turned to Lorna. "Would you read it? Please, every word that's on the screen." Lorna's hands were trembling as she pulled out her phone. Camille said, "Lorna, honey, you don't have to." "I think I do," Lorna said. Lorna read the screenshot Camille had sent her. It was ugly. It was everything Gideon had been told. Gideon holds on too tight. He built this place and he can't let it grow past his own ego. The firm is his ego with a lobby. In Camille's forwarded version, it just stopped there, cropped clean. A son's whole heart amputated at the wrist. The room was silent. Gideon's jaw was tight. Even now, even with Harlan and Wren behind me, I watched him hear those words in my voice and start to believe again. That's how deep the wound goes. That's how good she was. That's damning, I agreed quietly. If that's the whole message, Marnie stood up. She opened her plain manila envelope and took out a single sheet. "This is the full text thread," she said, "as it exists on Elias's carrier records, which he requested and received last week. Time stamped. Nothing added, nothing removed. I'm going to read the message Mrs. Halbrook was shown, and then I'm going to read the 2 lines that came right after it. The 2 lines that were cut off before she ever saw it. She read the cruel part, the part Camille had kept. Then she read the rest. But God, I love him. He's the closest thing to a father I've got. Don't ever tell him I said the ego thing. It'd break his heart. And mine." Nobody moved. "The message was sent," Marnie said, "to one person, not to a client, not to a rival. To his wife, a year ago, in confidence. She kept it for a year, and 4 months ago she cut it in half and mailed the cruel half to the wife of the man it would hurt the most." She set the page down in front of Gideon, next to Harlan's email. "That's not a worried spouse," Marnie said. "That's forgery, in writing, to a third party, causing a man his job. My nephew's a lawyer. He has a word for it. So does the firm's insurance carrier." Frances closed her acid yellow folder. When she spoke, it was in the flat, careful cadence of someone who has sat through many of these rooms, and never one quite like this. "I need to say something on the record because it's my job." She looked at Gideon, then at Warren, then briefly without cruelty, at Camille. 2 weeks ago, I helped terminate an employee for cause. The cause was a set of statements about his conduct. HR's obligation before any termination for cause is a fair and impartial review. We're supposed to interview all parties independently before we act. A pause. We interviewed everyone except him. We were told his denial couldn't be trusted, so we didn't seek it. I've been doing this 20 years, and I let that happen because the source seemed unimpeachable, a tearful spouse. Nobody lies about their own husband, we think, except the documentation in front of me now shows the central piece of evidence was altered before it reached us. She set both hands flat on the table. For the firm, that's not a personnel matter anymore. An unlawful termination built on a doctored document is exposure, real exposure, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of malpractice. My recommendation, effective today, is that the termination be voided in full and the record corrected, and I'd advise everyone in this room that what Mrs. Hughes forwarded to Mrs. Halbrook, a false statement of fact in writing to a third party that cost this man his position, has a name in civil court, whether or not anyone in this room chooses to use it. The word court landed in the room like a dropped tool. I want you to notice something about that moment, because I've thought about it a lot. I never said the word lawsuit. I never threatened anything. I brought no weapon into that room at all. I asked questions and true people answered them, and the consequences assembled themselves out of nothing but the facts, the way a verdict does when you finally stop preventing it. That's the whole asymmetry of it. She'd spent 4 months building. All I had to do was stop holding the truth up off the floor and let it fall where it always would have. Camille had gone the color of the paper on the table. Gideon read the full text, twice. I watched his eyes go over the last line, the closest thing to a father I've got. And I watched 63 years of a hard man's pride collapse very quietly inward, like a building taken down from the inside, so it doesn't hurt the street. He set the page down, he took off his glasses, and he looked, for the first time in 2 weeks, directly at me. I fired you, he said, for saying I should have retired a decade ago. I never said that. I know, Gideon said. His voice cracked on it. I know that now. God help me, Elias. You told me you loved me like a father, and I read half of it, and I put you out on the street with a box. You were shown half of it on purpose, I said, by someone who spent 4 months making sure you'd never think to ask me for the other half. And then I did the only thing I'd come there to do. I turned to Camille. The room turned with me. She had run out of moves, and I watched her know it. The tears were still there, but they'd changed function, from a weapon into a reflex. Her chin came up. That fluency I'd fallen for at 26 was still in her, still reaching for a version of this room where she came out clean. I did it for us, she said. Not to me, to the room. Do you understand? He was going to make partner and pull away from me completely. 14-hour days, travel, that girl, a flick of her hand at Wren. And I was supposed to just wait at home and become nothing. Nobody ever protected me, not once in my life. So I protected myself. That's all any of you would have done. She turned to me at last, and for 1 second the mask came all the way off, and what was under it wasn't a monster. It was just a frightened person who had decided, a long time ago, that the world was going to lie about her eventually, so she'd better lie first and lie better. I just wanted us to be safe, she said, and I felt it. The pull of 7 years, the cinnamon, the we always figure it out. I felt exactly how easy it would be to soften. If you've ever loved someone who hurt you and still felt that pull at the worst possible moment, that traitor tenderness, you already know what I'm about to say. Before I say it, if this story has meant something to you tonight, take a second to think of the one person in your life who chose your side when it cost them something. Then keep listening. I believe you, I told Camille. Her eyes flashed up, startled, hopeful. For half a second, she thought she'd won again. I believe you were scared, I said. I believe nobody ever took your side. I believe that's a real wound, and I'm sorry for it. I mean that. The room was dead still. But you knew where mine was, I said. That's the part I can't get past. You're the only person I ever told about my brother, about my father believing him, about being 14 and grounded all summer for something I didn't do, learning that being right doesn't matter if nobody takes your side. My voice stayed level. That's the thing I'm proudest of, level as a laid floor. You didn't just take my job, Camille. You went to the one wound you knew I'd never healed, and you built your whole plan on top of it. You needed me to believe again that the truth is mine and the belief belongs to someone else. Because a man who believes that will follow the only person who'll still be his mirror. I stood up. You almost had it, I said. You almost made me 14 again. I looked around the room, at Marnie, at Wren, at Harlan's green light, at Lorna, at Gideon. But it turns out, I said, there were more people on my side than there were people on yours. There always were. I just never let myself count on it before today. That was the break, right there. The one crack in the floor. My eyes stung, and I let them, in front of all of them, because for the first time in my life, the room was full of people who believed me, and a man is allowed to feel that. I'm done, I said quietly, with the job question. That's yours to fix, Gideon. With the marriage question, that's already answered. She filed 9 days ago. I've known since the 8th night. Camille's head snapped toward me. You knew, she whispered. I know how to keep my face still, I said. You taught me that. Turns out I already knew. She didn't fall apart. I'll give her that. She gathered her coat and her dignity in the same motion, and she stood, and she looked around the room one last time, cataloging it, the marketer in her already drafting the version of this she'd tell people later, the version where she was the victim of a coordinated ambush by a bitter man and his loyal little cabal. None of you know him, she said to the room. You'll see. We do, actually, Marnie said. That's the problem. Camille walked out. The door didn't slam. It just clicked, soft and final. The exact sound the elevator had made 2 weeks earlier when it closed on my whole life. Funny, the symmetry of it. Same sound, opposite direction. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The Rowan Street model sat under its glass in the corner, catching the light. Then Gideon put his glasses back on and folded his hands and said the sentence I'd been fired to prevent anyone from ever needing to say. Francis, he said, the termination is void as of this moment. I want it struck from his record entirely. Not settled, not resolved, struck like it never happened because it never should have. He looked at me, and I want the offer that was on this table 2 weeks ago put back on it. Principal, if he'll still have us, which is more than we deserve. Francis was already writing. I sat back down because my legs, if you want the truth, had stopped being reliable. I want to be careful here at the end because this is the part where a lesser man gloats. And I promised myself in that conference room I wouldn't become a person who needed the loud win. So let me just tell you what actually happened, plainly, the way I'd tell a friend. The severance was torn up. The record was struck. 3 weeks later, Frances handed me back a small box she'd been keeping in her bottom drawer, and inside it was the brass nameplate, and I carried it up to the 4th floor myself. Marnie was the one who screwed it into the door. She wouldn't let me do it. You built it, she said. Somebody else gets to hang it. That's how it's supposed to work. I didn't have a good answer for that, so I just held the screwdriver box and let her. Wren made senior designer a few months later. She earned it 100 times over. She still won't let me take credit for a single thing, which is exactly right. Harlan sent a bottle of something absurdly expensive with a note that said, "Told you." H. Gideon and I are all right. Not the same. You don't come all the way back from a man reading half your heart and believing the worst of it. But he came to my table, and he asked me the question finally that he should have asked on day one. He asked, "What happened?" And I told him, and he listened to the whole thing, both halves, before he decided anything. That's all I ever wanted from anyone. The whole message before the verdict. The divorce went through not long after, uncontested. She didn't fight for the house or the money. I think, in the end, the only thing she'd ever wanted was to be the last mirror I looked into. And once that was gone, there was nothing left to take. I hear she moved to the coast. I hope she finds a room full of people who'll take her side before she has to lie to earn it. I mean that with no edge at all. It took me 33 years to find mine. People ask me sometimes whether I regret how quiet I stayed. 9 days in that house, passing the salt, keeping my face still while my whole life burned down slow. I don't. Because here's what I finally understand. The thing my father never taught me, and my brother never let me learn. Being right was never going to be enough. It never is. The world doesn't hand a quiet man his name back just because he deserves it. Other people hand it back to him. Marnie, who stood by the food at every party and watched. Wren, who stood up when she didn't have to. Harlan on a speakerphone saying a guy planning to jump ship doesn't fight for your building's soul. Lorna, whose hands shook, reading the truth out loud against the friend she loved. I spent my whole life building walls so solid they wouldn't need a witness. Turns out I had witnesses all along. I just had to stop being too proud and too scared to count on them. If you take one thing from my story tonight, let it be this. Build your life well. Yes, do the work. Get it right. But don't build it so alone that no one can vouch for you when someone decides to lie. The strongest thing I owned, at the end, wasn't a wall. It was the people who'd been quietly on my side the whole time, and the one my wife was too proud to notice. That's my name back. Struck clean, hung on a door, screwed in by someone else's hand. I look at it every morning on my way in, and every morning I still bring 2 coffees. Somebody always comes in cold.